Hello everyone, my name is Kelly Johnson and I'm a Curriculum Officer at NCFE. My background is vocational education and I have 15 years of experience of working in the FE sector in various roles including a teacher, a curriculum leader and a curriculum operations manager. I specialise mainly in the subjects of sport, health and fitness, and I have educated young people from level 1 to foundation degree level, including A levels. My role is to support centres through the planning, onboarding and CPD processes for NCFE cash qualifications, but in particular the V Cert qualifications, with a focus on promoting and advancing learning. You're very welcome to this webinar, and in today's session we will examine the active teaching and learning strategies for the V Cert Technical Award. So let me begin with a little activity to get you thinking. Looking at the image on the slide, think about and answer the following questions. What do you see? What do you think about that? And what does it make you wonder? So this is what I see. Apprenticeship, workshop, cutting, woodwork, joinery, a career, learning skills by actively doing something. This is what I think. A young person doing joinery work, learning new and on-the-job skills to pursue her career pathway. I believe it is the better way to learn, as they have to think harder and be more involved with their learning. And this is what I wonder. Is it a job placement or at a college? Is there a career pathway? Has there been scaffolding to get to this point? And will there be any reflection in order to progress, develop and/or improve? Now, visible thinking is an approach designed to make the learning process clearer. In other words, students get to know the processes which go into deeper thinking. And see, think, wonder is a thinking routine. It is designed to work with images, but it could also work with lots of other things, such as watching a video clip or carrying out an experiment. And students answer the questions, what do you see? What do you think about that? And what does it make you wonder? Another thinking routine is Think, Puzzle, Explore, which links students' existing knowledge to their future independent inquiries. And students answer the following questions. What do you think you know about the topic? What questions or puzzles do you have? And how can you explore this topic? Perhaps you're already using thinking routines and could consider how they can be developed further. But if not, give these ones a go with your learners at the start of your next lesson, for example, as they are really easy to set up and they really get the learners thinking. So the plan for the webinar today is to firstly give you an overview of the phases of teaching and learning and a summary of the present, apply and review concept. I'll then be discussing what active learning and metacognition is, what the evidence and the benefits to you and your learners are, and I'll then explore some of the teaching strategies that are available and how they can be applied into your daily teaching practices to improve performance and achievement. I will also be modelling some of these teaching strategies so you can see them in action. So things like the See, Think and Wonder activity at the start of the webinar. I'll then lastly explain to you some of the suggested ways of maximising the participation in these activities. I'm going to begin though firstly by talking through the phases of learning. Jeff Petty in 2009 stated that learning and teaching falls into 3 phases, each requiring appropriate teaching methods. In the present phase, these are methods to present new material to students or to encourage them to think it out for themselves. This might involve facts, theories, concepts, stories, or any other content. In the apply stage, these are methods requiring students to apply the new material that's just been presented to them. And this is the only way to ensure that students conceptualise the new material so that they can understand it, recall it, and use it appropriately in the future. In the review phase, these are the methods to encourage students to recall former learning so as to clarify and focus on the key points, ensure understanding, and to practice and check recall. I think it also can be viewed like a 3-legged stool, and if one leg is missing, the stool would fall over. You don't have to follow this structure to the letter, it just shows the components commonly but not invariably found in effective lessons. Usually, it will benefit from it being adapted or revised to suit the context on the day and to your learners. This slide shows an example from Jeff Petty's evidence-based teaching book of a lesson structure using the PAR model. He argues that commonly used present methods such as teacher talk can bore students if they go on for too long, so active present strategies are particularly useful. He suggests that the sequence of elements is not a necessary one, and in practice you may visit each of these phases many times. So, for example, you may do a bit of present, a bit of apply, then a bit more present, and a bit more of apply, and then do a review and so on. Whatever the sequence, however, he does go on to say that it is difficult to imagine a topic being taught well without visiting all three elements in the PAR model. The content of this webinar covers some of the active methods to present material to students and some apply and some of the reviewing activities. Then all the learner's needs are met in an active way. Next, I'd like to talk through the concept of active learning, the theory behind it and the evidence, as well as the benefits to your daily teaching practice. And lastly, I would provide you with a checklist that can help you to develop an active learning approach to your students' learning. To begin, I'd like to model an active learning teaching method known as the Think, Pair, Share activity. Firstly, I'd like you all to take a minute to think about what active learning means to you. Then turn to the person next to you and discuss your ideas for a minute, and then have one person share the group's thoughts within the wider group. For the purposes of this webinar, please do put your thoughts into the question box. If you are attending this webinar individually, you could divide your thoughts into two sections as if you did have a partner, just so you can see how this activity might work. Some of the responses that have come through include learning by doing, the learner being actively involved with learning, learners thinking about what they are doing and reflecting, and teaching by not telling. The Think, Pair and Share is also known as snowballing. It is a strategy where instead of starting by teaching by telling, you ask a question that leads to what you want the students to learn. Then each individual writes down their thoughts without reference to others. Next, students can then share what they have written in pairs or threes. Optionally, the pairs or threes can combine to create larger groups, which again, they compare their answers and then agree a group answer. Lastly, the teacher asks each big group in turn for one idea that they have had and writes the useful ideas on the board and perhaps saying a little bit more in support of each idea. This can also lead to a whole group discussion. It is like teaching by asking, which I will cover later in this webinar, and the teacher then tops up and corrects the class answer. So what is active learning? Active learning is anything that involves students in doing things and thinking about the things that they are doing. That is, by applying what we have learned in order to answer questions, for example. Active learning is a process that has student learning at its centre. And active learning focuses on how students learn, not just on what they learn. Students are encouraged to think hard rather than passively receive information from the teacher. And students are doing something including discovering, processing, and applying information. With active learning, students play an important part in their own learning process and involves discussion, problem solving, presentations, group work, role plays and debates, to name but a few. Students build knowledge and understanding in response to opportunities provided by their teacher and interact with other students. What is the theory behind active learning then? Active learning is based on a theory called constructivism. Constructivist teaching, or brain-friendly teaching, as it is also known as, is where learning requires a stage where students are required to process the information that has been given to them. Constructivism emphasises the fact that learners construct or build their own understanding, and they need activities which require them to make personal sense of the material and so to also construct their own meanings. Meaning is personal and unique and is built upon personal prior learning and experience, which does differ from student to student. There is no one way to learn something, and a variety of tasks and experiences are required to meet individual needs. Now, a useful analogy here for effective teaching, I would say, is sports coaching. So in this example, the student is an athlete and their teacher is their coach. The teacher, who is the coach, may explain, but this is not enough. The student, who is the athlete in this analogy, must train to practice and develop their skills, and the teacher or coach provides suitable activities for this and then provides feedback on the student's performance during the practice and suggests corrective work where this is necessary. The athlete can only improve performance by training. The student can only improve performance by learning activities. The brain is a parallel processor, not a sequential processor. So learners need to think about parts and wholes at the same time and to integrate topics. Learners develop their existing knowledge and understanding in order to achieve deeper levels of understanding. And this means that learners are more able to analyse, evaluate and synthesise ideas, therefore achieving the higher order skills in Bloom's taxonomy. The research that has been carried out over the decades widely supports that learning activities that require active student processing improve recall by as much as a factor of 10. They are more enjoyed and they create deeper learning. Active methods require learners to make their own meaning of the material and come to their own understanding of it. That is, that they develop their own conceptualizations of what they are learning. Passive methods such as listening are not as effective. Gray and Gibbs in 1992 found that the constructivist approach played a significant role in the process of learning to constructing knowledge. The learners involve themselves in activities and show their readiness for active learning. Similarly, that collaborative and cooperative work developed contribution spirit among students of overcoming their shyness and introversion. They became more independent and capable of taking initiatives in conducting research projects. They also learn ethics, social skills, and etiquettes in groups. Active learning works best at every academic level. For example, Peter Westwood in 2003, who summarised research on how best to teach students with learning difficulties, argued for highly structured, intensive, well-directed, active learning methods. And Professors John Hattie and Robert Marzano in 2001 found that active learning adds a grade and a half to achievement. What are the benefits then of active learning? In an active learning approach, learning is not only about the content, but is also about the process. It allows students to create personal connections to the material for students, which increases their motivation to learn. Active learning gives students greater involvement and control over their learning, as well as providing students with an opportunity to think about, talk about, and process course material. It provides more frequent and an immediate feedback to students. It also allows you to check learning so you can get feedback on whether students understand the material and can correct misunderstandings. Learners improve their learning when they are required to use it, and active methods produce much better achievement. Furthermore, encouraging active learning helps students to make better progress based on their enhanced skills and understanding. Analytical skills also help students do better at problem solving and applying their knowledge. An active learning approach encourages all students to stay focused on their learning, which will often give them greater enthusiasm for their learning. Your lessons have more impact and are more interesting, and it may even give you a break and a chance to mark the register. It allows students to practice important skills such as collaboration through pair work and group work. Students develop their reasoning skills as well as the factual knowledge of the subject and practice the skills in which they will be assessed by. And it makes your life easier as it fosters active, constructive student participation. It builds self-esteem through conversations with other students and creates a sense of community in the classroom through increased student-to-student and teacher-to-student interaction. Stephen Burnage is an experienced author, trainer and education consultant with over 25 years experience of working in schools in the UK. At his CPD workshop on active learning, Stephen Burnage suggested putting active learning into practice by devising a checklist. And he suggested that in order to develop an active learning approach to your students' learning, it will help to ask yourself the following questions. What do the students in my class need to learn? How will the task that I have chosen help my students to learn? How am I to use questioning? How far am I creating a positive classroom environment where it's fine to take learning risks? If I need to focus on content, can I encourage the development of a skill at the same time? And how will I present the task to the students? And lastly, how will I know that every child in my class has learned and made progress? You need to carefully consider what you want your students to learn or understand, and then shape the task to activate this learning. All active learning tasks should focus on encouraging the students to think hard for themselves rather than being passive recipients of knowledge. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about metacognition, the benefits of metacognitive activities for your learners and how active learning and metacognition can be linked. So what is metacognition? Metacognition is the ability to think about your own thinking. Meta means beyond and cognition means thinking. So metacognitive strategies involve reflecting on and regulating how you think. Specifically, metacognition involves becoming aware of and taking control of one's knowledge and understanding. So in other words, students who are metacognitive are aware of gaps in their understanding, and they are willing to seek out resources or strategies that will help them fill these gaps. But the elements of active monitoring and modifying of thought processes make it much more than this. It is also a form of self-regulation involving self-awareness, critical analysis skills, and the ability to problem solve. Metacognition helps students of all identities develop strategies for self-assessment and reflection that they can use to adopt their approaches to learning depending on the context. Metacognition can also help a student's ability to plan, monitor, evaluate, and make changes to their own learning behaviours to confront challenges more effectively in any learning environment. For students, having metacognitive skills means that they are able to recognise their own cognitive abilities, direct their own learning, evaluate their performance, and understand what caused their successes or failures, and learn new strategies. It can also help them learn to revise. This is because it optimises their basic cognitive processes, including memory, attention, activation or prior knowledge, and being able to solve or complete a task. It makes them more efficient and more effective, and so they can make more progress. There are a variety of ways teachers can help students become metacognitive, including incorporating reflection into assignments and activities through the use of written or verbal prompts. When we apply metacognitive strategies, we become better learners. We can control not only our thoughts, but also our actions much more effectively. So what do you think are the benefits of metacognitive learning are? Some of the potential benefits of metacognition in learning are as follows. There is higher achievement levels for students. There is also evidence that metacognitive practices can also compensate for any cognitive limitations that a student might have. Another benefit is that there is an increased ability to learn independently. Being able to monitor their own progress lets them take control of their learning inside and outside of the classroom. It improves resilience. Identifying their successes and failures and which strategies work best for them or which have failed increases students' perseverance in getting better at their work. It also aids disadvantaged students. According to the Department for Education, a report in 2021 and research done by EEF, teaching in a way that supports metacognition is beneficial for students who are at a disadvantage to their peers. And this is becoming increasingly important as the performance gap has widened once again due to COVID-19. It is cost effective. This method of teaching does not require specialist equipment nor any other large purchases. It only requires teachers to be trained in the method effectively. It allows knowledge to be transferred. So metacognition helps students to transmit their knowledge and understanding across tasks and contexts, including reading comprehension, writing, mathematics, memorizing, reasoning, and problem solving. It is effective for all ages of students. Research has looked at both primary and secondary students, and even those who have not yet started school, and have found benefits in all these cases. And lastly, it improves emotional and social growth. Gaining awareness of their own mental states allows students to think about how being happy, respected, and confident in themselves. They are also better able to understand other people's perspectives. Although existing research positively documents the impact of active learning in that learning can result in deeper and more meaningful learning and engagement with a concept, topic, or idea, the focus is often on collecting and implementing techniques. But simply collecting and implementing active learning strategies and techniques is not enough to foster deep learning. To be effective, these practices must be intentional and connected to the course curriculum and objectives. And as Weimer in 2018 said, teaching techniques are an essential part of any active learning endeavour, but they aren't the centre or most important part of the student learning experience. Techniques provide the framework, the structure, and the context, but what really matters is what we put in the structure, so what students are thinking about and sharing. In short, while it is tempting to plug and play, to be effective, active learning needs to be examined in the larger context of student learning. Taking a metacognitive approach, that is, choosing forms of active learning that foster metacognition, can help prepare students to make the most of active learning experiences whilst helping them become more self-directed learners. Furthermore, choosing metacognitive approaches that are also examples of active learning provide a greater possibility of learning gains. Metacognitive approaches to active learning can be adapted and incorporated into virtually any course, and in doing so, teachers provide learning opportunities for all students. To be the most effective, teachers need to consider active learning approaches that are most aligned with and responsive to the ways in which people actually learn, because those will ultimately result in the greatest gains in learning. To be intentional about metacognitive strategies that will have the greatest impact on student learning, teachers should first examine and reflect on their own teaching practice through a metacognitive lens using a self-regulation cycle. Next, teachers should consider how they help students begin to develop metacognitive skills and behaviours through activities and assignments, which I will talk a little bit about in more detail further in the webinar, and engage students in retrieval and reflection before, during, and after class. Finally, teachers should consider the ways that they can engage students that both throw light on the misconceptions about learning and inspire them to use metacognitive skills and behaviours. Now, I'd like to take a look at some of the teaching and learning strategies and activities that you could use in your practice to get the best from your learners. Some of these strategies will require very little preparation, some of them will require resources, and some will require a little bit more preparation. Furthermore, some of the activities that I will be sharing will be active learning strategies or activities, and some will be a combination of metacognitive and active learning strategies or activities. This slide shows some of the active and metacognitive learning strategies that can be used in your daily teaching practice. They generally can be categorised into entry or starter activities, then the main lesson content, and then end of lesson activities. But please do feel free to use any of them at any point in your lesson so that they best suit what you want to achieve with your learners. I will, over the next few slides, talk about these strategies in a bit more detail. And whilst I do talk through the key principles of each strategy or activity, please do reflect on what strategy or activity you would be interested in trying out and how it could be applied to your daily teaching practice or a key topic or content. Just before I do move on to a bit more detail of these strategies, I'd just like to mention the strategy of modelling here. And through this strategy of modelling, you can model what good looks like for your learners to reinforce the learning points. It helps students to ask their own questions and design their own good models to answer these. And I have done this in this webinar with a few of the easier activities to facilitate, such as See, Think, Wonder and Think, Pair and Share. So the first strategy I'd like to talk you through is one that's called teaching by asking. So rather than teaching by telling, it is suggested that you start the topic by asking students a question which leads you to what you want to teach, and this is teaching by asking. So for example, in business and enterprise, you could start with what promotional methods are available to businesses and think of as many as you can. Or in health and fitness, why do you think a PARQ is important to complete before undertaking any physical activity? Students work in pairs or small groups or buzz groups to answer a question or series of questions using common sense, experience and prior learning. Students can have all the same questions, or they can be given different questions on the same topic. And this group discussion can last for literally a minute or less, or for 20 minutes or longer. Ensure each group has a scribe and check their attention to task and that the quality of their work by checking what the scribes have written down. Ask them if they need more time, and if they have finished, ask each pair or group for one idea that they've had, ensuring that each group offers something different. Write the strong ideas on the board, saying a little bit more in support of each idea if you wish. Allow the class to discuss any points of disagreement until they have agreed a common answer. And when the class has its common answer, top up the answer with any additional points the class has missed and correct any misunderstandings. If a student gets half of the answer, it saves half of the teacher talk and generates interest and thinking skills. And cooperative learning is the same as teaching by asking. Teachers do questions on resource material, and then the resources are provided to the students. In class mind mapping, the teacher requests as many ideas as possible from the whole class, asking questions such as, in engineering, how has different engineering disciplines and how their applications solve problems and shape the modern world? In interactive media, what are the features of an interactive media product? Or in graphic design, why is Quentin Blake recognised and creditable within the discipline of illustration? The teacher or a student brings together the answers on the board, classifying them, if necessary, by writing them in groups. It is usual to be non-judgmental at this stage. This method involves the whole group and can enliven a dull session. Alternatively, ask them to mind map individually and can be progressed to a think, pair and share activity. Or you could ask students to mind map in groups and the session then becomes like teaching by asking, like above. Jigsaw is one of the many cooperative learning methods with high effect sizes, meaning that you can feel confident that this strategy makes a difference. To start, you would divide a topic up into, say, 4 subtopics. So for example, in health and fitness, lifestyle factors could be divided into diet, smoking, alcohol and stress. Alternatively, students can be given 4 different key questions or spectacles that require students to analyse the same material but from a different point of view. For example, in business and enterprise, all students are given the same information about the customer service policy of an organisation, and different groups look at this from the point of view of being the customer, operating within the customer service team, the finance department, and the business competitors. Then you divide the students into 4 groups. The teacher chooses the groups, and there should be mixed ability, experience, ethnicity, gender, and so on. Don't use friendship groups, and students may complain at first, but they will soon accept if you are insistent. Each group studies one lifestyle factor or question with the help of text and worksheets, etc. And this is usually done in class time, though you might be able to adapt the method for students to do learning outside of the class as independent learning. The students now form new groups, and each new group is a jigsaw with 1 student from each of the 4 original groups. Any student that left over acts as a pair in a full group. Each group has now one expert in each of the 4 lifestyle factors. You may even have 2 experts in one lifestyle factor. The new group now completes an activity that requires them to peer teach each other about their subtopic and requires them to cooperate with the rest of the group over a combined task that requires them to integrate the 4 topics. For example, they could be asked to explain the lifestyle factor to the rest of the new group using headings such as definition, recommendations, effects on health, and strategies for improvement. Also, they could be asked to cooperate to find 3 things that all of the lifestyle factors have in common, or cooperate to find, for each of the 4 lifestyle factors, 4 unique characteristics. Or design a leaflet on lifestyle factors, and in your leaflet you could place the 4 lifestyle factors in order of severity of potential consequences, ease of improvement, etc. 90 years of research and 600 studies shows that cooperative learning really does work. It is related to high attainment, high order reasoning skills, creative thinking, and excellent transfer of learning to unrelated topics. It is excellent for bonding groups, developing social skills, working with others, and for promoting equal opportunities. Comparing and contrasting has been found to improve students' understanding of the topics compared by much more than 1 grade. It is a preferred method for helping students to clarify concepts that are often confused or poorly misunderstood. Students are put into pairs or small groups and are given a grid like this one on this slide from interactive media, where students will be looking at similarities and differences of websites and mobile apps. It can be on flip chart or A3 paper, and they can work in groups to make a bullet pointed list of important similarities and differences between the 2 concepts. This can also be done as an individual activity where the same grid can be provided on A4 paper or as a task on Google Classroom, for example, and completed as homework. They can work from previously unseen or from notes to do this. Clearly, this could be used in any subject to help teach almost any pair or similar concepts. For example, in engineering, you could ask students to determine the similarities and differences in hand drawings versus CAD drawings. Or in performance skills, students could look at the similarities and differences of the roles of a musician and a musical theatre performer. A large body of evidence shows that peer instruction benefits student learning. It has been found that students who explain their method to each other learn much faster than those that do not. So with peer teaching or reciprocal teaching, students explain to each other how they did something, for example, solving a problem. By explaining conceptual relationships to others, students define their own understanding. In question pairs, learners prepare for the activity by reading an agreed text and generate questions and answers focused on the major points or issues raised. At the next class meeting, pairs are randomly assigned. Partners ask their questions of each other and provide corrective feedback on their answers. In learning cells, each learner reads different selections and then teaches the essence of the material to his or her randomly assigned partner. This strategy allows students to take on the role of a teacher and attempt to teach learning strategies to other students. For example, if they were teaching reading comprehension, they might show their fellow students how to question what they've read, clarify things they don't understand, summarize the text, and make informed predictions about what they have read. This can help metacognition by deepening their knowledge and understanding of each learning strategy. A wrapper is an activity that surrounds pre-existing learning or assessment tasks and fosters students' metacognition. It's a quick and easy tool for monitoring and evaluating metacognitive activity. You can build a self-monitoring wrapper around any pre-existing part of the course, for example, a test or exam, assignment, or homework. And wrappers work because they are time efficient, learners are doing the task anyway, it only adds a few minutes to a task, metacognition practice is built into that task, learners are self-monitoring in context, feedback on accuracy can be built in, feedback is immediate, and support can gradually be faded out, and in just 3 lessons, most learners are successful on their own. and minor interventions can significantly change behaviour. So exam wrappers are worksheets containing reflective questions that help students to think about their performance in a test or exam. You could give them to your learners both before and after they receive their results and feedback. The worksheets can be given out before they receive feedback and should ask them to think about how they're prepared for the exam, for example, which study strategies they used, etc. Those given out after the feedback should make the student reflect on the mistakes they made and how they could prepare differently to ensure greater success in the future, making them strategic learners. You could also adapt this and use this method for an assignment wrapper. The traffic lights, or RAG, which is red, amber, green rating activity, can be used in a variety of ways in the classroom and can be adapted to working either with large groups, small groups, or individual students. For example, students could use them to signify their current knowledge or understanding of a new topic, or students could use them to signify what they have found confusing or challenging in a lesson, for example, red, what made them think differently about something, amber, and what they've understood well, green. They could also fill in the traffic light worksheet answering these questions at the end of each lesson. This method makes them reflect upon their learning, developing their metacognitive abilities. Smiling, frowning, or neutral faces could also be used in the same way, for example, developing skills of reflection, self-regulation, and self-assessment. I have also used the faces to guide me on the status of students' well-being, where I can check on how everyone was feeling at the start of a lesson, for example. Fist of 5 is also a good technique to gauge feelings and to receive quick feedback, where a closed fist represents 0 and is not feeling good, or they don't understand the topic, and 5 fingers is I'm feeling great, or I really do understand this topic. I have also used the RAG rating for revision planning and preparation, where learners can identify what key content topics they feel they are confident in, for example, green, what topics they feel fairly confident in, for example, amber, and then what topics they need more revision on, and so on, which is red. This also helps students devise and develop a more personalised revision plan, where they can more clearly identify the help and support they need, whatever that might be. For example, teacher or peer explanation, referring back to their class notes, watching a video, quiz questions, a mock exam, and so on. This is a very flexible and adaptable strategy, so no doubt you will very quickly be able to think of applications for the traffic light activity in your own practice. As a follow-on activity for your learners, there then could be HOTS questions for the green learners, or pair a green learner with a red learner, or an action plan can be devised for improvement or development, and so on. The 1-minute paper can be used during the last few minutes of the class, where students write a response to the most important thing I've learned today and what I understood the least today. You need to ensure, though, that you read or review all of them before the next class and use them to clarify or correct or elaborate more for students. The muddiest point is a strategy that is similar to the 1-minute paper, but it only asks students to describe what they didn't understand during class and what they think that might help them. As with the 1-minute paper, you need to ensure that you read and review all of them before the next class and use them to clarify, correct, or elaborate more for students. But if many students have the same problem, reteach the concept in another way. Ask students to do something on exit from the classroom which keeps them thinking right to the end. For example, students are asked to write one thing that they have learned and one question that they want to discuss on a post-it note, and then they stick them to the wall as they leave. Or teachers can ask an exit question or give an exit fact. The question or fact should be as thought-provoking as possible. During the last few minutes of class, you could use a ticket out of the door where students are asked to write a response to a question or two about the lesson content or concepts, and they hand it in as they exit the class. Again, ensure you read and review them all before the next class and use the responses to clarify, correct, or elaborate more for students. Traditionally, classes have often focused on helping students to acquire knowledge, with homework time being used for development and application of this knowledge. In a flipped classroom, the opposite happens. Students get to know a topic before the lesson, and then the lesson is used for activities which develop their thinking and understanding. Examples of activities in preparation for the lesson include note-taking from a textbook, reading an article on the topic, listening to a podcast or watching a video, and doing some research before the class. And examples of lesson activities include then discussion or seminar based on the homework, a problem-solving task, or an essay planning activity. Journals help students to develop their self-awareness, improve their ability to plan and monitor progress, and promote skills in self-reflection. Try asking your students to keep personal learning journals and assign them weekly questions for them to reflect on, such as, what was the easiest for me to learn this week and why? What was the most challenging for me to learn and why? Which study strategies worked well? Which study strategies didn't work well, and what could I do differently next time? Or did my study habits work well for me, and what effect did they have on my learning? Which study habit could I improve upon next week? And what are my targets for next week? They could also record ideas they have during a lesson and questions they want to ask, as well as reflecting upon how the ideas they have learnt connect to other topics. The journal doesn't necessarily need to be a notebook. Your students could use any format that works well for them, including a mind map, blog, a list, a mobile phone app, or something else that they decide works well for them. Instead of getting students to put their hands up as soon as they need help, set some rules that make them be more involved in the thinking process. One strategy that I've used is called the see three before me principle. This principle encourages students to look in 3 other places, hence see three before me, to find the answer to their question before they ask the teacher. For example, you could get them to go and ask another learner or a group of learners to discuss it first and only ask you if they can't find the answer together. They could also try looking in a book, Googling it, trying again, looking for inspiration, using an online tutorial, and comparing their work to someone else's. You could also try getting your learners to think about exactly what they need to know or which part of their work they need to improve before coming to you. This helps them to practice self-directed learning. Try the see three before me policy to encourage students to practice and become better self-directed learners. This also does work well in a flipped classroom. Ask before you tell is another good strategy to help students to get more involved with the thinking process. It is where you encourage curiosity by getting your learners to ask open-ended questions that start with what, where, why, and when and how. Ask a friend or another learner, what do you think about this? Or how do you think we can work on this activity together? Or what support do we need to complete this task or activity? Open-ended questions will help develop critical thinking skills and will improve the learner's commitment and ownership for their own learning. This slide identifies some other strategies and activities that you could use to investigate further as part of your future development and that you could use in your teaching practices. Some of my favourite ones are quiz creation. Get your students to design quizzes to share amongst the class. This could be done on paper, or you could use a free online tool such as Quizlet or Hot Potatoes. Graphic organisers. They help us to consciously improve our thinking processes. They assist us in organising our thoughts, create connections, think more deeply, and help us to visualise processes and procedures. By using a graphic organiser, we are more effectively thinking about our thinking. And examples of graphic organisers include mind maps, flowcharts, and spider diagrams. Transformation is where students are given text in one format and are asked to present it in another. So, for example, in business and enterprise, the product life cycle stages could be turned into a newspaper report, or in music technology, where a set of instructions about configuring software preferences could be turned into a statement about how the device works and when it would be useful. Or in art and design, where a chronological account of the different movements could be reformulated under given non-chronological headings and so on. Mnemonic aids are strategies that you can use to improve your information retention. They involve using rhymes, patterns, and associations to remember, and they work by adding context. which is additional or surrounding information, to a fact to help you recall it. My favourite one is to use with my learners is that my very excited mother just served us 9 pies, for the order of the planets from the closest to the furthest to the sun. I'm sure you have a favourite one too. So the use of classroom opinion polls using clickers or online polling questions asks students a variety of questions about a topic and seeks their anonymous opinion. Through peer assessment, this involves students in the assessment process, with them taking on a role of teaching by reviewing work of other students against set criteria. It stimulates an active engagement of students in their learning. On a final note, I'd now like to talk about effective management of active learning strategies in order to maximise participation. All the strategies and/or activities that I've included in this webinar are best done in pairs or small groups. However, some can be completed individually or adapted for individual students. It can help to give your students in the group specific roles, such as those which follow. It is unlikely, though, that you would use all of these roles at the same time. So students can be given role cards with all the roles described until they get used to it. Roles can rotate from lesson to lesson and would include a teacher, a checker, a scribe, a questioner, a vocabulary chief, and a leader. Students enjoy these roles and soon get used to them, but don't expect them to use the roles effectively without practice. Just after the first time you use these roles, it would be useful to reflect with the class on how to make them work well. Consider ensuring that each student in a group has at least one role, and that this will avoid some students becoming passengers. These roles work best if the teacher makes sure that he or she will test every student's learning after the activity. And this can be done during feedback or with a quiz or test that is warned of in advance. If they know that any member of their group might be asked questions on the material, they will work with their checker to ensure that all members understand all the points. The roles of the questioner and the checker, etc., help to show students good practice in reading text, but do point this out to students. For example, good readers formulate important questions that the text might answer and ask themselves, do I understand this, and is it important as they read? They also check that they know the vocabulary and summarise the key points. Hence, the roles are not arbitrary or purely managerial, but model good study practice. In task design, there is a useful checklist to ensure your tasks and supporting materials cover everything. Check and/or review any necessary prior learning, establish purposes, tasks and questions, etc. Locate information and resources, plan how to complete the task successfully and delegate if necessary, get to work on the tasks, monitor progress and understanding, make a record, evaluate information and task completion, check the group's understanding, communicate findings to the rest of the group and teacher, and the teacher then tests the understanding of the whole class. So when managing group work, individual or practical learning, it will involve some preparation in the first instance, where you will review or confirm any learning that is required for the success of the task. The task is then set and must be clear and in writing. Specific roles may be set for the learners, and groups are formed and learners work on the task with an appointed scribe for each group to record ideas in progress. Teachers can check progress and attention to task by examining the scribe's material. Teachers will need to check and correct the scribe's notes to determine the group's success. Ask for ideas and listen. Ask clarifying questions if necessary, but do not overhelp. You could also use the medal and mission for feedback. For review and feedback, every group is asked for their findings and no single group provides all the answers. For example, each group is asked to make only 1 point and at one group at a time. Key points are emphasised and notes are taken or kept. Use the assertive questioning style where answers are received with a thank you and the correct answers are not given away. Finally, there are some useful pointers for success in group work. And for more detail, this can be found on Jeff Petty's website under the 25 ways for teaching without talking. In summary, though, he suggests that you need to prepare the task, then set that task for students. Students then begin working on the task. Next, it could be that the teacher or a peer is checking and correcting whilst using the medal and mission for feedback. Then the student's feedback and review the completed task with a tangible outcome, so for example a mind map, and then a final review of the key points through a quiz or a test, for example. A KWL chart is a way of tracking the U, plan, do, review process. And the idea is to create a chart for your students to use with the space for them to answer the following questions. What do I know? What do I want to know? And what did I learn? These questions, which are know, want and learn, make up the letters in KWL. It can be used at the beginning of a lesson where students can answer the first question about what they already know that might help them in this lesson. This will activate their prior knowledge and highlight any misunderstandings. The second question provides you with ideas for future learning activities. Students could structure their answers in the form of how, when, or why questions. The monitoring stage is not included in the KWL chart, but you could ask your students to ask themselves their own questions, such as, how am I doing? And is this strategy working? At the end of the lesson, students can answer, what did I learn? As well as filling in anything else that they want to know that remains unanswered. It is also good for students to reflect on their own cognitive growth, such as before this lesson I thought that, and now that I know that. Jamboard is a digital interactive whiteboard developed by Google. The user can create a jam where they are able to draw, create shapes, lines, and add text. The user can also choose between 4 pen types and 6 colours. There are also tools provided to erase and move objects, as well as create digital sticky notes and turn their touch point into a digital laser pointer. It is an easy-to-read handwriting and shape recognition tool, and you can draw with a stylus but erase with your finger, so it's just like a whiteboard. And you can also put images from a Google search and save work to the cloud automatically. So I think at this point it would be useful in the use of either a Jamboard or a KWL chart to consider as we approach the end of the webinar what you have learned from this webinar and what action you're going to take as a result of this webinar. So we have now reached the end of the webinar, and I'm going to check to see if there are any questions that have come through in the question box. And I will try and answer as many as I can in the time remaining on the webinar, and that those that I don't get to today, I will take offline and respond in a timely manner. Also, please do get in touch with me anytime directly using kellyjohnson@ncfe.org.uk, or if I'm unavailable, our general email is provider.development@ncfe.org.uk. In the meantime though, I'm just going to put on the references and linked resources that I've mentioned during this webinar. So, as I said, I have mentioned some references, some useful references for you to refer to if you require further support and information. This is page 1. This is page 2 of the references. I have also included some useful linked resources for you to refer to, again, if you require further information and support. This is page 1. This is page 2 of the linked resources. I will now remain on the webinar for the remaining 5 or 10 minutes or so, should you have any additional questions. Otherwise, please do feel free to leave the webinar, and I'd appreciate it if you could complete the evaluation that will pop up at the end to help improve our service. Thanks again everyone for your time, and on behalf of everyone at NCFE, stay safe.